I showed the film in the Biennale in 2013 or 14 in Austria. And then I've shown it in a few small galleries, but it was really great because Milou asked me if I had some paintings and did I want to show the paintings, which, as we know, like a film is a million of paintings, right? Every still is a potential painting. So I started thinking about it that way. And I was really sort of influenced by, as a kid, by the late abstract expressionist, Frankenthaler. And there's this great painting of her in a sort of pink blouse in her studio. And it looks sort of like like this abstract painting with her in the middle. And I think, as a kid in high school, it really influenced me. And I started thinking, like, well, I want to make a film like a painting first. I didn't want to make the paintings first, I wanted to make the film, and so I did a lot of effects. And all these effects are basically done in Final Cut and the color correction. And then I thought, maybe I'll make a few stills from it, because film doesn't last long. And then you asked me if I would show some, so.
I think what we're all fascinated by, and what I'm interested in knowing, is the process when a filmmaker chooses this kind of subject. So for me as a viewer, I've always been entranced by these dream states, and how any artist, a filmmaker or a painter, how they can create or trigger a dream state in the viewer. Right. So for Land of Nod, which is really fully a dream state to me, I'm very curious from Coleen. We're surrounded by so much stimulation everywhere we look, but this is a rather humble subject, an everyday subject, but still has this action and mystery and crime and drama going on. How did you choose this particular subject for your dream film?
Well, as most of your friends, as you know, I was living in the Lower East Side on Ludlow since like 78, still live down there. And I knew my neighbors very well, and suddenly the whole neighborhood got involved in drugs. So I filmed it in DV. Like I would tell people I was filming it. I filmed it out my window. I would interview them, all these things. But I never had a plan for it. And then about 4 years ago, I started going through a lot of old footage, and I had all of this high-8 footage of Ludlow Street. And it was really depressing. I mean, it was so depressing because that was that really bad era of when the neighborhood sort of went downhill and heroin got introduced, and it was sad. So when I was looking at the old footage, I thought, this is like too much, right? And I started thinking about this one woman that I had seen. She was only there one day, the woman that's always on the stairs. Just one day I filmed her. The other stuff is filmed around her. And it's funny because I sort of thought of the Frankenthaler image, and there she was. And I sort of thought, well, if I did a lot of effects, because the footage was washed out, I could sort of make a painting of this material that was very heavy. And I also didn't want the people to be seen. Even though it's 30 years later, it didn't seem fair to show their faces. So I sort of layered it in these effects. And the more I started doing the effects, the more I thought, well, it's really great. It's like a moving painting. And it was also sort of like the Land of Oz. That scene where they're in the poppy field and everybody's like, and I did hallucinogenics when I was, in my 20s. I never did, the heavy stuff, but I did some of the hallucinogenics, and I think that sort of affects the fact that you can think of a normal image in a different way. And also I had started like in the early 70s, I was making films with images that were distorted by high-con and low-con maps, which means that the delineation of the image gets sort of, you can't quite see it. And I did some films with no image at all, but just light change. So I was still interested in the idea of perception, you know, where it is. This is pretty recognizable, but not quite. In the neighborhood, you know, they would ask me, why are you filming us? You know, and I got into a little trouble occasionally. So, you know, the guys in the street, the women I could talk to, but some of the guys, you know, I had to like be really careful. But I never planned to use it. And then I just thought, but it was such a period of time that disappeared, hopefully forever from my life, you know, and everybody else's. But it was also this incredible time in the Lower East Side, because, you know, most of us lived in the Lower East Side and went through it, or at various ages went through this sort of, and also it was a sort of incredible community of a mix of races and cultures, which is disappearing now. So I guess that was part of the interest in doing the film.
And the perspective, the time shifts that you use here in terms of how the narrative is working and time shifting, do you find on a personal level that time shift, that perspective from decades later, that you can see beauty in this despair in a way that you couldn't before?
Yeah, it's still, you know, it's still, I mean, in a way, I didn't put any theme in it, and I took out all the really bad material. I have some material that you just wouldn't want to see. So I took that out, and basically it's just people waiting, waiting for something to happen, and nothing really happens. And so that also took some of the sadness out of it. But it brought back a lot of memories when I first started working with it. And then I thought, well, it's just an image. And what's in an image, right? I mean, what is in an image? It usually calls back, you know, your own perceptions or archetypes of perceptions. Or, you know, early on I read Len Kuleshov, who was an influence on Eisenstein, where if you put, you know, a series of images together, it creates a story. So I sort of wanted to, this has a story, but I sort of wanted to back off from a literal, I mean, there is a, things happen here, but it's very sort of subtle.
The woman with the red hair,
Yeah.
she was there for the day.
Just that one day.
Okay. Why did you focus on her? Because you didn't know who she was?
I
Was she
didn't know her. She
the
was,
unknown?
yeah, she was not from the neighborhood, and she was so beautiful. I mean, she was, and she reminded me of all those women by de Kooning and, you know, and Matisse, and, you know, it was like, you know, usually women don't focus on women, but she was, and I was older. I must have been like I was almost like mid to late 30s, and she was probably 16 to 20, somewhere there. It was very hard to tell.
Wow.
And she was so beautiful and so innocent, and you're like, why is she there? This is totally dangerous,
right?
right?
Had any idea why she was there?
Well, I think she was there. She was hanging out with the drug dealers, but she seemed so innocent and so unaware of what was happening around her. I asked my neighbor, who was later, she's at the end of the film, who's talking to her, and I said, is she okay? Whatever happened to her? And she goes, oh, she's fine. I don't know. You know, maybe she went back to Connecticut. Who knows what happened to her, right?
She was waiting to score, right?
Well,
She was looking
I didn't ask her. I asked her at one point when I went by in the street, do you mind if I film? And Betty was there, and Betty said, oh, she's fine, let her film. So, you know, but she didn't really talk much, but she had a, you know, she'd been to school. She clearly was at least a middle-class education, and she was maybe slumming, I don't know. And I was always worried because then she disappeared, but maybe she went, this is not for me, right, living down here.
Interesting that you focused. I think it's good.
Yeah.
For the film and for the work that you focused on.
Oh,
that.
thanks.
I
Yeah.
also am interested that you were interested in de Kooning.
Yeah.
You can see it, actually.
Yeah.
I think.
When I was in high school, I was in Westchester, and it was all the sort of early, late abstract expressionists, early stain painters, and, and I started painting before I did film. And, I went back and looked at, like Joan Mitchell's paintings. I was like, wow, it looks just like that, right? Mm-hmm. After her, like, French period, when she came back to New York, I was like, and I saw that. We were up in high school, so we went to all the museums, and I'd seen her paintings, but I had forgotten about it.
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Right, percolating.
Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth.
I was when you had mentioned before, as I was playing at the beginning, that if you put a series of images together,
Mm-hmm.
it tells a story.
Right.
And I was thinking at the same time that this is, you said, 18 minutes long?
Right.
And so how long was the footage that you actually had
Cut
gathered?
down. I think I had gathered about 4 or 5 hours.
4 or 5 hours.
Coleen, can you describe this scene, like the hole in the wall? And
Well, do people really want to know that?
Yeah.
And all the whistling, constant whistling, the drug dealers.
Cut out some really tough parts.
I did. People were so oblivious to me with the camera, and I knew so many people that I would just walk around, take pictures, or lean out my window and take pictures, or partly because I knew my neighbors very well, and even though I wasn't, they sort of appreciated that I was taking their point of view, but not doing anything. I wasn't doing anything with it, but there was they knew I was an artist.
There's a way to reveal and there's a way to expose.
Right.
Right, and it's like how you use the material and what you do with it, I think,
Right.
fear nothing. Risk all,
Just like you, Beth, I know.
For everyone here, I think we have many artists, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Your bravery and your courage are truly an inspiration to everyone who views your work, everyone who lives in this city. We are all indebted to all the artists who created the foundation for everything that's important about life here and elsewhere. So,